Hello, everyone. Today we're going to go through the detailed tabulations, also known as banners, also known as tabs, for the Northwood Village District Business District Survey. So in a prior recording, I did go through the questionnaire that's associated with this study, but today I'm going to go through the detailed tabulations for the study, and I have two sets of those. One shows 3 segments, which they've decided that they want to break out the results based on whether or not the person owns or rents their home, if the person is employed or not employed, or if there is children in the household. Okay, so that's presence of children. So interestingly enough, what we didn't talk about last time is that this study actually has been going on for 3 years. And we know that because we have the trend tables that I also included that shows you the results that they got in 2009, 2008, and 2007. Okay, so we know that this is a trend study. Now, we'll go back to the regular table, detailed tabs. So let's jump in and go through the results that they're showing here. So the first thing that we should look at is that we always have the name of the study at the top. The next thing you will always see is whether or not there is a filter for this table, right? So the whole thing is called detailed tabulations. Each page of a detailed tabulation is called a table. Okay, so each page is a table, the whole thing is the detailed tabulations or detailed tables, right? So let's jump in. We know that there is no filter on this table because it says base is among all. Now, if there was a filter, such as those that are, senior citizens, we would see where it says base and it would say those that are senior citizens, okay? Or they'll say those that are 65 plus. So right now we know that the filter is everybody, basically. So there basically is no filter, but the filter always is at the top. It tells you how many people. Now, what is always first on a detailed tabulation, especially if there's a lot of questions. Now, it's not here because there's not a lot of questions in the survey, believe it or not. It may seem like there is, but what's here is actually very, very short. Generally speaking, you will always have a table of contents, and the table of contents is going to tell you how to find each of the questions that are on the questionnaire, because in theory, you're going to have a table for each question, because otherwise, why would you if you weren't going to show the results, right? So the first thing we need to look at here is the columns. So the columns represent the segments. As I said before, we've segmented the data by own versus rent, employed, not employed, children or no children in the household, okay? Now, you'll see under the total line here, going across horizontally, we did 250 interviews for this study. And each of the various segments have different numbers of respondents. So we know that there was nothing in the screening criteria that said we had to get equal numbers for each of the various segments, okay? Because if they did, then there would be equal numbers in each of the columns, which that is not what we're seeing here, okay? So there was nothing there on that. Now, let's see. So we have 99 respondents own their home, 137 of the respondents rent their home, 159 are employed, 87 are not employed, 54 people that responded have children, 196 do not have children, okay, in the home. Now, that probably means, if we were to look, probably there's more senior citizens there, right, because the children are just gone. So how are these percentages done, okay? The percentages are done always on a table, let me go down a little bit to show you some percentages. Before I get there, just where it shows a hyphen, that means there's no respondents there. That's essentially a 0. But instead of showing 0, they just have a slash mark. So let's go down here. So let's check this out. So in total, so we'll look at the total line, we can see that 80 of the respondents responded on Thursday, 89 respondents responded on Friday, 81 on Saturday, okay? So we know that they did this study Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so not even Sunday because there's no Sunday category. Oh, the Sunday's up there. So, yeah, so Thursday, Friday, and Saturday they did the interviewing, right? So one very important thing that you must remember about detailed tabulations is detailed tabulations. Now there are some, there's always, a reason for something to be different, but 99% of the time, detailed tabulations will always, the percentage calculation will always be based on vertical percentages, not horizontal percentages, vertical percentages. So what does that mean? What it means is that the number 61, to get this 31, it's 61, so it's a number that said Thursday, divided by the number of the people with no children. So it's the number of people with no children in their household that said Thursday. It's divided by the number of people that said no children in the household. It's not, that 61 is not divided by 80, okay? So it's not a horizontal percentage. It's always percentage vertically, okay? And that's very, very important to know. Okay, so that's how the percentages are done. So now you may be asking yourself, how do I know whether or not a percentage is meaningful or not? Well, the way that we generally say whether or not something is meaningful, I'm trying to get to it so you can see a percentage, way that you know that something is meaningful is based on a statistical test. So the thing we have to remember, though, is that a difference may not be statistically different, but it may be a meaningful difference to you. The fact that any difference appears could be very important, but it might not be statistically different at the level that you want it at, okay? And I'll describe that in a second. But the key also is something can be statistically different. A percentage can be statistically different and not mean a darn thing. So, yep, statistically different, but who cares, okay? So the key for you really is to understand any significant difference. I mean, you're always looking for significant differences, right? But if you have big differences that are kind of close to significant, you might report those as well. But you want to make sure that any significant difference that you're reporting out is a meaningful difference, okay? So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about on this page is what is a significant difference and how can I find it on the table. And this is going to be very, very important to know how a significant difference is locatable on a table, okay? The key for that is at the bottom. That's why I wanted to move it so you can see the bottom. Significance testing among subgroups, AB, CD, EF. Okay, that's important. I'm going to show you why that's important in a minute. Uppercase letters indicate significance levels at 95%. And as you recall from other videos, 95% level of confidence is generally speaking what we use. Okay? But sometimes what you might care about is the almost significant stuff. Remember when I said something might be almost significant and it's meaningful? That's things that are really significant at the 80% confidence level. Okay, so how do we find those? The first thing we need to do is understand what the heck this A, B, C, D, E, F is. So let's go to the top of this page, and we will see that under each of the segments, there is a letter. So A for own, rent has a B, employed has a C, not employed has a D, children, E, no children in the household, F. Okay, that's really important because remember, you need to know how the significance testing is being completed, okay? Sometimes you will read at the bottom that it's basically everything is SIG tested against everything, okay? Or what you might find, and what you found here, is that you're only comparing the two items to two segments under a major segment category, right? So in this case, we know that they're only testing own versus rent. So they're not testing own versus employed, right, if that's a statistical difference. And the reason for that is that's one of those things that doesn't make sense, right? There's no reason to compare whether or not someone owns their home to whether or not they're employed, okay? That's not a statistical, you're not going to get anything if you do a stat testing. I mean, you could actually get a result and know if that number is statistically different, but it doesn't make sense to compare those. What it makes sense to compare is things that are usually from the same question. So the answers from the same question, like, do you own your home? Do you own or rent your home? I own or I rent, okay? So we know that we are only testing A to B, C to D, and E to F, okay? So now we know that that's what we're testing. Now how do we figure out if something is statistically different or not, and at what level, okay? In order to show this really accurately, what I want to do is show you something that shows us a couple of ones that are 80% and things that are at greater than 80%, so 95%. Okay, and this one is a really good example. So this question was what? Including today, approximately how many times would you say you visited the Northwood Village Business District? Okay, so let's see. So, and they grouped them too, okay? And they did this based on an average, right? Remember, this was a write-in, right? So in the past 7 days, they have the average number of visits. Past 4 weeks, the average number of visits, and so forth. Now, let's go down in here. So the thing that you really care about is the average. Don't worry about the 235 and the 100% and the 98%. Don't worry about that. The key here is the average number of visits, okay? So as you will see, the mean scores here have some letters underneath it, okay? So you'll see under rent for past average number of visits were for past 7 days, you'll see there's a capital A and a lowercase a. Okay, so what does that mean? We go down to the bottom, because we always go to our key to find out what uppercase and lowercase means. Because it could be, in the detailed tabulations that you're looking at, it could be that an uppercase A means 99% statistically different, and a lowercase means 95%. Usually people don't use 99% confidence level. It's a precision rate you really don't need, usually, unless you're going to do something silly like try to predict the next president of the United States. But in general, we're going to use 95%. And in this case, as you recall, an uppercase letter means statistically different at 95%. Lowercase means 80%. Now, the way that they've chosen to show this is that if it is statistically different at 95%, they're going to show you the upper and lowercase letter. They don't really need to do that. They really could have just given you the uppercase letter, but because if it's at 95% statistically different, then it means it's also past the 80% threshold, and that's what that's trying to tell you. That's a well, duh, but in any event. So how do you read that answer, okay? So let's go through this. So what this is saying to us is that the average number of visits for those who rent is statistically higher than the average number of visits for those who own their home, okay? And we know that because the letter underneath the 4.8 is A, which corresponds to own, and then the corresponding percentage mean score is 3.53, okay, for A. So that's what that is telling us. So we also know that it's statistically different for the people not employed. They are statistically more likely to say they have visited more times here than those that are employed. And then those that have children in the household are statistically more likely than those who don't have children to say the average number of times is higher. Okay, so that's what that is saying there. okay? So, and now when we go down at the bottom here, while these percentages are pretty small, what we can see is that there's this 2.1%, which is the percent that own their home. They are statistically higher at the 80% confidence level because it's a lowercase b, right? So it is statistically different, just at 80%, not 95%. So we wouldn't be reporting most likely anything that's at 80% confidence level, but I guess it really depends on, you know, if you're doing the study and what your threshold is for precision. Okay. So again, when we're looking at a table, we want to make sure that we see where the filter is, if there's a filter on this study. Okay, and here this one does not, or this table, and this one does not have a filter. So we can go down a little bit, and I'll show you one where there is a filter. It'll just take me a second. It's a couple questions down. I don't want to give you whiplash here. Come on. And where is it? And we're going to get to it. I should just give you whiplash so we get down to the end here. Okay. Well, we'll get there in a second, but we've gotten to a table before this, so I want to show this to you. Sometimes on tables, there are questions that are related, and if I was to bring up the questionnaire, you would know that questions 3A, B, and C are related. Okay, they're talking about they're talking about what restaurants were visited. Okay. And let me go up to 3A, so they're going to show you this. Okay, here's D, 3AB, AC. So it's really important that you pay attention to the question number they're showing you here. So here is just the question results for question 3A, and of course this is the end, so let's go to the top part of this question. It goes on to another page here. Because the percentages are pretty small, so I know that there has to be more here. Okay. All right, so question 3A, what was your main reason for visiting today? Great, okay, so they tell you the main reason. But remember, we also had 3B. And what did 3B say? 3B said, oops, oh goodness gracious. 3B, or 3C, I think it goes for, I think it might have skipped B. But then it said, the next question was 3B, we'll just go here, 3B and C. So those are, remember we had the main one that you visited, and then the next question was, okay, what was the next one you visited, and then what was the third one you visited? So what this one is what's called a summary table, and a summary table does just what it sounds like. It summarizes questions, so it summarizes the answers to the questions. So what it does is it brings together the results without duplication, okay? So there's without duplication, and that's the key. Without duplication, it gives you the results of the three questions together. So how is that different? Well, what we need to do is, let me show you the results of 3A, okay? So this was 3A, Tina's Grocery. So when we ask it for what was the main reason you came to the village, Tina's Grocery, 22.4% said Tina's Grocery. Okay, great. But then when you say, okay, what was the main reason, and then what are your next two reasons for coming, right, which is 3A, B, and C, together, that summary table, which is the places visited today, you'll see that Tina's Grocery then shot up to 33.2%, okay? So it's not duplicating it, it's just picking up some more the people that put Tina's Grocery in the second place or the third place, which is the other questions that are related to question 3, right? So that was B and C. Okay, and then we also have, come on. Okay. This questionnaire is hard to do. Okay, and then 3 was ever visited. Okay, places ever visited. Okay, so this is some of the other ones. And then we have a summary table that shows all 3 of those together. Okay, so let's go in here. We'll get to the summary table. So you know what the summary table because it has A, B, C, and D. And now let's check out Tina's grocery. Now it's up to 42%. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you all. Okay, so now let's keep going because I would like to show you the, if we can show a filter here. I thought there was one that had a filter. Okay, so as you'll recall, in the questionnaire video, I talked about how do you calculate a mean score for a question when you have, when it's a closed-ended question where you're giving a category, like 0 to 10, 10 to less than 25, when there is, at the end, there's $100 or more. So the problem is, what does or more mean? So how do you do a mean for that? So to calculate the mean for this question, what you first have to do is decide what is the midpoint, okay? And as you recall from the other video, from 0 to 10, that's easy. That's 5. I can even do that in my head. Okay, so 10 to 25, well, the midpoint is 17.5. Great. The midpoint 25 to 50, okay, the midpoint 37.5. 50 to $100, the midpoint is $75. Okay. Now, remember what I said, it's subjective. You have to decide what your endpoint is going to be, and then once you've decided that, then you can decide what your midpoint is. Okay, so what is your endpoint, and what is your midpoint that corresponds to that? Okay, they've decided that the midpoint is 200. Okay, so if the midpoint is 200, then you have to decide, okay, what is that endpoint that they decided? But you could probably figure that out in your head, that if this is the midpoint, what it must be. Okay, so I'll leave you to that calculation. I'm sure you can do it. So in any event, that's how they are showing that. That's how they're going to calculate the mean. So this score, so what's in here, 73 for total are giving 17.5. If you answered this one, then all 73 of them are getting a score of $17.50. Okay, these 27 people under total are getting a score of 37.5. Once you have that, then it's real easy to do a mean score. Okay, then you can just take an arithmetic average. Very simple. Okay, and that's what they did to get the mean scores at the bottom here. Okay, so you see the mean scores. They also did a median. Not quite sure why they did that, but mean score here. And then you can say, all right, are there any statistical differences? So let's do the statistical differences here and say how you would report this one, okay? So the first thing is, and again, this is how much they spent, right? The value of how much they spent at this place. So how would you do a report out on this? So remember, the first thing you're doing is looking for statistical differences. And then after that, you want to make sure that they're meaningful, okay, but look for statistical and meaningful differences. And then how you would describe it. Okay, so how do you describe this? So let's look at this. First, the first thing you'd want to do is say in total what people said. So I would say on average, people spent $27.01, or you can just say about $27 on average in total, okay? Then what I would say is that those who own their home spent more money than those people who rent their home, okay? And then what I would do is put the percentage, the actual amount in parentheses, right? So you can, so people actually have the numbers. Or you can say those that own their home are more likely, the way you'd have to write that, it would have to be at the end. And sometimes when the way you could write it, you could have like the percentage next to own or next to rent, but the way that this one is, the dollar amount that really lends itself to being at the end. So it would be, you would say, those who own their home are more spent more money on average than those who rent their homes. And in parentheses, you would say $34.39 on average for those who own versus $21.46 for those who rent their homes. Okay, and that would be in parentheses. So because remember, we're always doing the percentages down, so vertically. That's why you have to say those who own are more likely to spend more than those who rent. What you are not saying is the opposite way, which is the higher amount spent, the more likely they are to own their house, okay? What that is doing is flipping the independent variable. And I probably should have mentioned that at the top here when we first started, but anything that goes across the top that is a column heading is the independent variable, okay? So if it is in a column heading, if it's a segment heading or a column heading, which these are, own versus rent, that is an independent variable. The dependent variables are always shown on the left side. These are called stubs, okay? Stubs are the dependent variable choices, okay? All right. So that is how you're going to say it. It's going to be those who own their home are spent more than those who rent their homes on average, okay? Hopefully that is clear because it is very important that that you know that. Now, another thing that's very important is when you have an open-ended question, and I should have mentioned this on the questionnaire video, but I know I didn't do it, so I'll do it here as a way to make up for that. Now, when you have an open-ended question, it's where people will type in their response, or the interviewer is going to write the response. Well, you can't summarize those open-ended responses with a percentage unless you do something called coding. So what is coding? Coding means that you are going to count the number of times somebody said a particular idea or a code, right? So here the codes were atmosphere, appearance, right? So the question is, how would you describe it, okay? So they've done a net score here for appearance, but basically what the codes were that were built for this question were very nice, nice atmosphere, great place. That's code 1. And 59 people said that, okay? So they counted the number of times someone said that, and it was 59%. What they would do is for each of the open-ended responses, somebody physically goes in and changes whatever words that are there for the number that is associated with very nice or nice atmosphere, okay? So each one of these would be assigned a number. So you don't see it here because it just gives you the name, but this means this was given a 1, this was a 2, this was a 3. And then they just counted how many 1s there were, how many 2s there were, how many 3s there were, okay? So each code is assigned a number. You would have to do it that way, okay? But again, this is just a way to summarize an open-ended question. You do it through coding, okay? Very important, because otherwise you just have a big dump of responses that people gave to the survey, and you're going to leave it up to the reader to pick out what the key findings are, right? And they really wouldn't be able to pick out the fact that those that have no children in their household are statistically more likely to say that the atmosphere appearance was how they would describe Northwood Village, with something about the atmosphere or the appearance. They're statistically more likely, those without children are statistically more likely to say atmosphere than those with children in the household, okay? So that's, again, how you would read that. Very important there. But again, coding is key to these. You wouldn't be able to do open-ended questions if you didn't have codes for those kind of things, because you'd have no confidence that people were reading it right. Now let me just go to the end here, and I'll just show you the demographic questions. Now the key here also, this is a pretty simplistic table. In the past I've used a more aggressive table, but which means, in questionnaire, which means it was huge and a little bit unwieldy, and that's why I changed it. But the thing to make sure that you know is that the table numbers are not always the same as the page number, okay? So if someone is to tell you that the question that you need to look at is Table 13, the question on Table 13, it does not mean what's on page 13. It's what's on Table 13, okay? So this is Table 13. It's page 42, but it's Table 13. They don't always match. Sometimes they do match up, but a lot of times they don't, okay? So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Now let's go back over to the side so I can show you one more thing before we jump out of the survey. And I'm going to give you a little bit of whiplash here, and I apologize for the whiplash, but we are going to get down here to the end. Okay, so remember when I said that there are some filters in the table? We have finally gotten to a filter. So on question 8D, only those that said that they had heard of the Village Art and Wine Promenade were able to answer, have you attended it? Okay, so if you haven't heard about it, you probably haven't attended it, right? So that is the filter there. So we know that the questions here are only being asked and answered among those who were aware. Okay, so why is that important? Well, because you'll see only 53 people answered the survey question here, right? Because remember, 250 people answered the whole survey, but only 53 were aware of it, okay? So this is very, very small. This base is very small. So why does that matter? Well, as you know from prior videos, the smaller the base size, the harder it is for something to be statistically different, okay? So back in the old days, when we rode dinosaurs to work and we didn't have computers on our desks, and the way that we actually did statistical testing is, and I am not kidding, when I first started, I got a computer, but it wasn't on my first day. I want to say I got a computer maybe a couple of weeks after I started. It was a big thing that I had a real computer on my desk. When I first started to do statistical testing, I had a book that I had to look up numbers. So I had to decide what the numbers were that I was testing. So I would have to go in and say, okay, that they would tell me base sizes, and then I would look for the base sizes, and then I would have to look at the percentages. As you recall from, I believe it's chapter 13, when you're doing statistical testing, the key for these is the base size and the percentages that you're testing. The closer the percentages are to 50%, the greater the distance you need between the percentages, okay? It's one of those things, and so you knew that if you had something that had a relatively low base, right, the base is the number of people answering the survey. If it had a relatively low base, that survey question, I should say, if it had a relatively low base and the percentages were close to 50, the chances of it being statistically different were very low. But I would have to physically look at a table, actually kind of like this, which it would have base sizes going across. So it would go like 50 and then 100, 150, 200, 250, and then it would have numbers, the same numbers going down, 50, 100, and then you would have to find your base sizes to know whether or not it was statistically different. It was awful. It took forever. I mean, now it's like you hit a couple of buttons now and you know if something's statistically different. But back then, we had to look it up. And you got really good, right? After a while, you would be able to look at something and know if it was statistically different or not. You just had looked it up enough times that you knew, right? So, but again, the key here is that the distance between two percentages, so the difference between two percentages has to be pretty darn high if the base sizes are low. And what's a low base size? Anything under 50, right? That's what the book said too, right? So here the base sizes are 25 and 22. Well, it had to be almost double in order for those who rent, the score for those who rent, to be statistically less than the people that own their home, right? And statistically different, but it had to be double, right? So you can see here, you know, almost 9 percentage points. That doesn't cut it. That's not statistically different. 7-point difference, not statistically different. So
you know, it could be a lot of percentage points difference, but it's not statistically different, okay? So, oh, and what I was saying, again, that this shows the filter, that this is a filter, okay? So that was also where we started from this. And I just want to jump down to the demographic questions, just to go through, oh, the scalar questions. Here we go, the scalar questions. So one of the things that's important when you have a scalar question, remember this, we asked please rate the Northwood Village Business District in terms of the following, where it's a 10-point scale. 10 means excellent, 1 means poor, okay? And, so the first one is restaurant choices, okay? So you'll see the percentage that said 10, which is excellent, 32.9, people said 9, all that. We want to know what the people that gave it high scores. So that's usually what's called a top 2 box. A top 2 box is really important to know. Top 2 boxes, usually the top 2, well, it's the top 2 scores, a 9 and a 10 on the scale, right? So if your scale went from 1 to 7, then your top 2 box would be anybody that gave you a 6 or a 7. Here we have the top 2 scores as a 9 or 10, so we have that. Often people will do that because they want to know who the raving fans are. Usually that would be your raving fans, because on a satisfaction scale you gave them or an excellent scale, you gave them a 9 or 10. So that is really important, okay? So top 2 box, and a lot of times we'll have bottom 2 box, right? So it's the people that hate you, right? It's an easy way to do, to write up scores when you're going to do a report, because the people just have no patience, the people reading your report. If you're going to tell them the number that said a 10, the number said 9, number said 8, number said 7, who cares? I want to know what the raving fans, what percentage of raving fans you got, and the people that hate you. What are those percentages? That's the top 2 box and the bottom 2 box. So it's important when you have scalar questions that you look at that. You also might want to look at the mean score too. So, and this one has a mean score, if I can get to it. So there you have the mean score. So interestingly enough, what it's showing you is that the mean score is 5.5. So most of these people are like right in the middle, right, which is basically a neither. So, but I think there's quite a bit of variability here. So the scores are all over the place. It's not, they're not all answering the same thing. Okay. So if I can get down to the last thing I want to show you guys, let me just get to the end here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a whiplash so we can get to the end. Okay. Okay, so here's a summary table. So as you recall, we had question 9 had a bunch of parts to it because we're asking them to rate a bunch of things, right? So we asked them to rate special events and safety, and there's probably more at the top here because this is not the first, yeah. So ease of finding your way around, parking, okay. So we know here that this is a top 2 box summary page. So why is that important? Well, when you're doing a report, right, you don't want to have to go to each of the table pages to find what they said for 9A, the top 2 box, and the top 2 box for 9B, and then the top 2 box for 9C. You don't want to have to go through that. You want one page where you can find all the results you want. Because remember, you're going to tell them who the raving fans are, right? So you can say, you know, for those who own their house, what are they most likely to be raving fans of? Those who rent, what are the statistical differences? And it makes it easy to find it instead of you having to keep going back and forth to all the different pages. So that's why you'd want a summary table for the top 2 box. And then you have a summary table usually for a bottom 2 box as well, okay? So that is important. It makes it a lot easier. And then again, the last thing are the demographics questions. Generally speaking, demographic questions are the ones that you're going to use as your independent variables. We only have 2 of the detailed tabulations. Remember, the one was the trend that showed the years. And then this one, my guess is there are more tables that they looked at because they had more demographic questions. Interestingly enough, they don't have that many going across here. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 banner points, okay? So that's 7, 6 independent variables because total is an independent variable. But they could have shown a lot more. They have 7. The banners can hold up to about 22 columns. It gets really, really tiny, but you could have used more analysis variables there. I don't know why they only used these. They could have done a lot more than they did. Interesting side note, the reason why you can only have 22 columns or 22 variables on a table has nothing to do with Word or showing this. It has to do with the fact in the old days, back when we were looking things up, the statistical differences, looking them up in a book, they had the way that these results were run were through punch cards, and there were only 22 rows or 22 columns in the punch card, so you could only have 22 columns, so that's why you're limited to 22. It's kind of old now, and we can do much more, but you just wouldn't show it on a banner for whatever reason. The nomenclature here is to do 22 or less. So, in any event, that's an interesting aside that you'll never need to know. So the banner points at the end really, okay, so the banner points don't change, but the questions do here. We just showed the occupation. They told us what the occupations were. That was a write-in, so you got a lot here. All right, that's one of the tricky things with the open-ended questions. They coded it, for those who said security guards or plumbers, whatever, so they coded it so that you can add it up, but there's so many different categories here. So when you're going to do a questionnaire, it's really important that you try to determine which categories you really need, because it's not really that helpful to have these many categories. You've got like 50 of them. That's not going to help you at all, especially with some of them have less than 1% respondents. Okay, so that was one of the ones I wanted to talk to you about. And then I wanted to show you one more that will show you the another midpoint one. There should be another midpoint here for age. I must have skipped it. Yeah, I skipped it. But in any event, that's what I wanted to show you on these detailed tabulations. If you have any questions on these detailed tabulations, please contact me. And thanks for your time and listening to the detailed tabulations. Thanks. Have a good day.